Okay, class, this is round two. My name's Wes McDonald, Discussion 5-Steffen, and last time I went way over, so I am timing myself and it's time to go. So I had two case studies, Amazon and the Japanese. So the case study for the Amazon, basically the rundown with that is that there was a group of expats, 14 different missions organizations, big organizations. They were trying to work together. You know how that goes, different denominations and all these things. Well, they finally kind of had a cohesive, hey, we need to get the gospel to these 90 unreached groups. We're going to work together. And so they left after 4 days and they had half of a mission statement put together. They were like, hey, this is great. 3 months from now, we'll finish it and we're good. We're going forward. Well, they didn't realize that the Amazon, the Brazilian churches were already doing this kind of thing, but with the tribal churches around the same time. And so there was a disconnect between what expats are doing and what Brazilian churches and tribes are doing. So during that, they realized, hey, the tribes and the Brazilians were really going, there's three waves of evangelism in the Amazon, and that is foreigners, expats, nationals, and indigenous. And all three have to be interdependent. So this is where the facilitation really comes in, is interdependency, not getting focused on what the Westerners are doing or what they're doing specifically in Brazil and in the tribes areas. 2008, all three waves were present. So everybody was in one place. They brought in, if you've ever watched Tip of the Spear, where I believe that's the name of the movie, Nate Saint, Jim Elliott, the missionaries go into the Amazon, they're killed. More missionaries come in and they receive Christ. And so they brought one of those guys, they flew him out of the jungle, Dewey, D-Y-U-I. And he came and he spoke, and there were tears across the room. Everybody was crying because he's a believer now and he's leading a movement in the tribal areas. And he put it out there. He said, I invite you to come and work with us. And that is countercultural for, the expat way, the Western way. Oh, we've got all the funding and all this stuff. They invited them to come work with them. Sorry, I'm not looking at the camera. So what were their needs? Some of their needs were phones, walkie-talkies, internet. Communication is hard in the jungle. Then you have transportation, sustainable economy. And the big takeaway was work with rather than for. Not to be territorial or exclusive, but to work together and be a cohesive unit for the gospel. So the other one, the 1967 in Japan, there was a movement called the Language Institute for Evangelism, or foundation, not a movement, but a foundation that started doing English classes. It was a big felt need in Japan. It still is. Over the years, they taught English. They would partner with chaplains and share the gospel with people during chapel times for the English classes. Well, fast forward, big companies come into Japan. They're training professionals in English and all these things. And so they start migrating to church multiplication. And so that movement helped them train hundreds of the top pastors in Japan and really develop leaders to multiply churches. If you know anything about the church in Japan, it has been a hard time really gaining traction in Japan amidst the culture and all these things. And that was one of the things that they did that they really facilitated that you don't see, you hadn't seen before in that culture, because the culture is very closed. You don't really talk to people about your faith and work and all those things and in public. But they began to do evangelistic activities that were meant to create a model for their churches and raise up lay leaders to actually be the hands and feet of evangelism. And everything from barbecues to home parties to city hall concerts, cooking classes, English classes, kids clubs, just really being involved in their communities and being outspoken for the gospel, which was very countercultural in Japan at the time, and still is a lot to this day. But they saw incredible movement and lots of hearts being changed, to the point that they even ended up changing their name to Asian Access to reach other Asian countries as well. And the book caps off with a missions trip out to Taiwan, and Japanese and Taiwanese have always, Japanese and most of the Asian countries near Japan have always had animosity because the Japanese were brutal with World War II and before, and there's a lot of history there. But God really prepared a way for them. There were tons of people that accepted Christ. They were only there for like 10 days. But the book caps off with the Taiwanese lead pastor, one of their lead pastors there, that was helping facilitate this missions movement. I'm at 6 minutes. I'm almost done. The Japanese come in on their faces to the floor and wash his feet and repent before him. And there's restoration, there's reconciliation, and there's facilitation for movement by the Japanese to be able to go back and minister, and it was great. It was incredible. I mean, that's really what we need to see in the church today. So thank you guys.